If you care about power, justice, and the future of the world, the books on this list are not just good reads. They're essential warnings, provocations, and invitations to rethink what you think you know. And this is the part most people miss. These titles don't just describe global change. They challenge the stories you've been told about democracy, capitalism, war, faith, and identity. Below is a completely reworded, expanded version of the original content, keeping all key information but presenting it in a fresh, conversational, and beginner-friendly way. The Best of Books 2025. This year's standout titles chosen by Foreign Affairs reviewers. November 30th, 2025. Every year, Foreign Affairs highlights hundreds of books on international politics, economics, history, and global affairs. In this curated collection, the magazine's editors and expert reviewers single out the titles that rose above the rest, works that are not only rigorously researched but also genuinely eye-opening for anyone trying to make sense of the world in 2025. These recommendations span continents and themes, from the hidden influence of a national security advisor to the fate of forgotten regions, from the politics of religion to the rise of tech giants and the struggle for democracy. Some will affirm what you believe. Others will unsettle you. But that's exactly why they matter. Editor's Picks. Zbig, The Life of Zbigniew Brzezinski, America's Great Power Prophet. By Edward Luce. Link: https://www.foreignAffairs.com/reviews/grand-chessmaster-Zbigniew-Brzezinski-Donalon. Edward Luce, known for his ability to turn complex political history into compelling narrative, tells the story of Zbigniew Brzezinski's life and mind, from his personal background to his rise as U.S. National Security Advisor. Rather than treating him as a side character in Cold War history, Luce shows how Brzezinski played a far more central role than most people realize in opening the United States toward China, helping to bring the Cold War to a close, and shaping the post-Cold War order that followed. The book reads like a blend of biography and geopolitical analysis, making it accessible even if you're new to U.S. foreign policy. The bold implication here, one that some may dispute, is that certain individuals, not just anonymous systems, can decisively redirect the course of world history. Read the review. https://www.foreignAffairs.com/reviews/grand-chessmaster-Zbigniew-Brzezinski-Donalon. Political and Legal. The History of an Idea. By George Varouxakis. Link: https://foreignAffairs.com/reviews/west-history-idea. George Varouxakis offers a sweeping intellectual history of the term, the West, tracing how its meaning has evolved from the late 1700s up to the present day. He argues that the modern political sense of the West truly crystallized in the 1830s, largely as a way to distinguish Western Europe from Russia rather than from the East more broadly. For states under pressure today, such as Ukraine, the concept of the West remains a powerful, even emotional, rallying idea. But here's where it gets controversial. If the West is an evolving political construct rather than a fixed civilization, what does that mean for countries that aspire to join it? Read the review. https://www.foreignAffairs.com/reviews/west-history-idea. In the Long Run, The Future of a Political Idea. By Jonathan White. Link: https://www.foreignAffairs.com/reviews/long-run-future-political-idea. Jonathan White reflects on the current struggles of modern democracy by focusing on something that often goes unnoticed: how societies imagine the future. He examines how visions of tomorrow shape political debate, cooperation, and conflict today, showing that disagreements about policy are frequently rooted in competing expectations about what lies ahead. White worries that many democratic societies are starting to believe that time itself is turning against them, whether because of climate change, economic stagnation, or demographic shifts. That pessimism, he suggests, can corrode trust in democratic institutions, raising the uncomfortable question of whether democracy can survive if people lose faith in the future. Read the review. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/long-run-future-political-idea. Economic, Social, and Environmental. Capitalism and Its Critics. A History from the Industrial Revolution to AI. By John Cassidy. Link. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/capitalism-and-its-critics-history-industrial-revolution-AI. John Cassidy charts the long story of criticism directed at capitalism, stretching from early attacks on powerful entities, such as the British East India Company, all the way to contemporary alarm over environmental damage and technological disruption. What's striking in his account is how many of the core objections have remained surprisingly similar across centuries. He concludes that reforming capitalism is not just a question of whether political leaders have the will, but also whether they can recognize and seize the right moments for change. The provocative undertone here is clear. If the same complaints about capitalism keep resurfacing, is the system capable of self-correction? Or are we trapped in a loop? Read the review. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/capitalism-and-its-critics-history-industrial-revolution-AI. Left Behind: A New Economics for Neglected Places. By Paul Collier. Link. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/left-behind-new-economics-neglected-places. Paul Collier focuses on regions that globalization and modern policy have effectively abandoned. Places like South Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, once powered by steel and now struggling with deep economic decline. He argues that over-centralized decisions, combined with a naive faith that market forces alone would fix everything, have failed these communities. Yet Collier also points to inspiring counterexamples. Localities that managed to reverse their downward spiral and rebuild economic life. The subtle controversy here is his challenge to both free market purists and those who believe only national-level planning matters. For Collier, local capacity and tailored strategies are crucial. Read the review. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/left-behind-new-economics-neglected-places. Richer and More Equal. A New History of Wealth in the West. By Daniel Waldenström. Link. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/richer-and-more-equal-new-history-wealth-west. Daniel Waldenström pushes back against the widely accepted narrative that the West has endured a relentless surge in inequality over the last century. Instead, he argues that the period has actually seen a broad democratization of wealth, where the assets and pensions of ordinary workers have grown more quickly than the fortunes of traditional elites. This interpretation flies in the face of much contemporary commentary, which often centers on billionaire wealth and income gaps. That makes this book especially likely to divide readers. Does focusing on broader asset ownership underplay the lived realities of those still struggling at the bottom? Read the review. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/richer-and-more-equal-new-history-wealth-west. Military, Scientific, and Technological. Vatican Spies. From the Second World War to Pope Francis. By Yvonne de Newell. Link. https://www.foreignafairs.com/reviews/vatican-spies-second-world-war-pope-francis. Yvonne de Newell delivers a detailed, almost cinematic history of espionage connected to the Vatican from the start of World War II through the papacy of Pope Francis. Packed with intrigue, clandestine networks, and political maneuvering, the book presents the papacy not just as a religious institution, but as a unique political actor. Because the Pope leads a tiny sovereign state with outsized moral and diplomatic influence, this story doubles as a fresh lens on recent international history. The book raises a fascinating question. Should the Vatican be viewed primarily as a spiritual authority, or as a subtle, but very real, intelligence and power hub? Read the review.